I'm Charley Martinez, and I was prepared to use the lapel mic there, but I kind of felt like I was like a broke man version of like Kicks Brooks around you done, and I didn't want to use that. It's kind of choking me out. So I'm gonna pivot up here, and if I end up moving around a little bit, I'll try to make sure to stay put right here so y'all can hear me. But as Troy said, I'm Charley Martinez. I'm an ag economist at the University of Tennessee in the Ag and Resource Economics Department. Part of the study that you're going to see, if you were at BIF last year, or if you've seen some of the podcasts that we've done, we've covered some of this, but with today's I guess kind of the bow on the present in terms of we finished the study, we've done some cleaning of the data, we've got a manuscript written, ready to roll, and so I'm going to cover bull buying behavior, understanding your consumers, commercial customer decision making, and so I'm gonna hit a little bit of a rewind and kind of give some background and some color to what you're about to see. Because what you're gonna see today is the accumulation of some work that Troy and some of my colleagues around the country and grad students and undergrad students have been working on since 2021. In 2021, we were running experiments to try to simply test if EPDs mattered. Our friends and the geneticist folks have always said EPDs can help make, decision-making processes easier for producers if you actually use the EPDs and understand them. And so the first experiments that we ran in 2021 and 2022 were just that. It was a paper that was titled Predicting Seedstock Bull Prices, Does Information Matter? And from that, we actually started running some pilot programs of the stuff that you're going to see today, where we actually had people using eye tracking. So the gentleman you see there's actually a bar, an infrared bar on the bottom of that computer, and it was tracking his eyes. And this was the first person that we know of that we've ever done eye tracking study with on the livestock side of things, where this is what he was looking at when he was looking at the bull and trying to estimate prices in that experiment. And so then in 2022, at the end of that year, we decided, hey, the paper showed and the study showed that EPDs matter, but we wanted to dive deeper and say what EPDs matter. We know that there's a plethora of information on an EPD profile. We wanted to see if we could pinpoint exactly what people are looking at whenever they're trying to estimate the price of a bull, and therefore kind of elicit willingness to pay, consumer behavior, and things of that nature. And so at the BIF last year, we started doing some preliminary analysis and showing those results. And at the time, we did not have a sample taken out of Iowa. So I know there are some Iowa State people here that we actually went to and visited with in December of last year. And we actually ran another segment of a study so that we can get one more people inside the sample that we pulled, but also in the southeast of the U.S., we are a net exporter of feeder calves, meaning all the calves that come out of the southeast go to the southern plains or go to Nebraska, Minnesota, get fed out, and go on to the next segment of the supply chain. Whereas in Iowa, some of those folks retain ownership through the feed yard. So it was a sample of people that might have different perspective as well. So that's what we wanted to test. And so some of the background is in the motivation behind this whole study that we did was. It's all centered around EPDs. The earliest EPDs were developed, and they were basically centered on birth weight, weaning weight, yearling weight, and milk. And then into the early 2000s, an EPD profile displayed growth traits, reproductive traits, carcass traits, and management/convenient traits with their respective percentile rankings. And that's going to be important in our study. So when we got to the early 2000s, not only was an EPD shown on the profile, but they also had the percentage rank of that EPD for that animal within the breed. And then also starting in the early 2000s, researchers started developing and incorporating the economic selection indexes into EPD profiles. And so if you think of the Simmental Association, TI, API, those type of indexes, or dollar B in the Angus side of things, those indexes are supposed to be more economical or more efficient decision-making tools for producers to look at an animal and make a decision. And so these indexes give us a single monetary numerical measure that's supposed to aid in the decision-making for a producer. But as these economic selection indexes have been developed and were developed, they were and currently are still placed at the end of an EPD profile. There are some layouts that take the EPDs and put them underneath, your typical production EPDs. But for the most part, if you go to a breed association, you're going to find the indexes either at the very end or at the very right, or at the very right and at the bottom if you're looking at like an American Angus Association website. And so this would be what you would look at for a typical EPD profile. And if we look, we have our EPD selection indexes, our economic selection indexes tucked off to the far right. And so if we think about that, visual cognizance of literature has shown that what comes first is seen first. And it's also known in our world of behavior as a primacy effect. And so with the recent eye tracking studies that have been done in other segments of the industry or other industries like eBay and things of that nature, we started combining that and bringing it over to this livestock kind of question of, well, if EP indexes and the selection indexes that are supposed to be more efficient, more useful are tucked off to the right, does this same kind of primacy effect take a hold of that consumer or that person that's deciding and intaking that information and deciding what they're willing to pay for an animal? And so could the current placement of economic selection indexes inhibit their usage? That was one of the questions that we started asking ourselves that kind of springboarded this whole study. And so to put this whole study in perspective, I've listed out the objectives. The first one was we wanted to understand the influence of different EPD profile layouts on buyers' accuracy of C-stock bull price prediction, and I'll explain a little bit more about what those last pieces of that sentence mean. We also wanted to understand producers' characteristics that affect accurate decision-making process when buying a bull. We wanted to understand producers' accurate decision-making across different states and different breeds, and I'll explain a little bit more of that here in a little bit. And then we also wanted to understand the factors that affect accurate price prediction of quality differentiated bulls by producers. Meaning, if you know how to delineate a high quality versus an average versus a low quality bull, what makes that person that good, or what are some indicators as to why they're willing or how they arrive at that kind of juncture. And so for our data collection, we actually collected data in 4 different states. And as I mentioned last year, most folks only saw the Tennessee, Alabama, and West Virginia. And then in December of last year, we went to Iowa to a symposium, and we actually collected data in Iowa in December of last year. So we have 4 different states represented. And also, if you think about it, as I mentioned earlier, we have different demographics in terms of what are producers shooting for at the end of the day. In the Southeast, most people are selling at weaning, or they're taking their animals to the sale barn, and that's the last that they see of those animals in terms of revenue stream. Whereas in Iowa, that still could hold true, but we got a lot of folks in Iowa that go ahead and maintain through this feed yard, and so they might have different objectives for their breeding operations. And so we collected data at those 4 different locations throughout 23 and 24. We have a total sample of 208 participants, 101 from Tennessee, 30 from Alabama, 37 from West Virginia, and 40 from Iowa in this study. A part of when we do experimental economics, there's also a term called altruism, meaning somebody might take an experiment and they're just going to go through this experiment, not really give you any good, valuable information unless they're incentivized to do that. And so how we incentivize people was, if someone came and well, I'll just use Dr. Rowan, if he came to the experiment, he was guaranteed $15 for his participation, which would take around 25 minutes. But throughout the process, whenever they're estimating the price of these bulls, we would randomly select a bull, and if they guessed that price accurate on that bull, they would also get an extra $10. And so they have the opportunity to walk off with $25 for about 25 minutes worth of their time. And so that's how we did the incentive, capacity for the folks that are, like being nerdy about experiments. This is how we maintained true responses from our participants. And then the other big thing that we did was we actually told participants when they were selecting prices on these bulls, and I'll explain more of what bulls were used and how many were looked at by each participant. They were told after they made their selection if they were considered accurate with their guess, meaning if a bull was $1,500 and they guessed it was $2,500, they saw that it was over the $500 threshold to being accurate, so it was deemed inaccurate. So they actually were getting updated information as they were taking the experiment, because we're trying to get them to get accurate, and we're trying to help them as much as we can throughout the experiment. And so what we did was we took 18 bulls, and so in our world we call them prediction tasks. And so each person saw 18 bulls inside of our experiment. They were based on actual prices from actual sales taken out of Tennessee in 2022. And what they would see is a looping video of a bull for 15 seconds, and then it would just replay the video, and they would stay there until they moved on to another task. And so they would see a bull just like what you're looking at now. They would see him walking around for visual inspection, but also they would get an EPD profile. And what the EPD profile, what we did was, knowing that we wanted to test layouts and accuracy, or the percentile ranks and layouts, What you're looking at here would be a typical, what we're gonna call a control or normal EPD layout, right? You have your cabin knees direct, your birth weight, weaning weight, all the way to the indexes, and underneath they have percentile ranks for that animal, for that EPD. So this is very important to kind of, when I start saying control or normal, this is what a normal or a controlled layout would look like. And so each participant would walk in, we would randomly select 3 bulls so that they can get, practice with it, understand how the operation is going to work, the actual experiment. And then we actually told them the range of the bulls, similar to how people, when they're in the market looking for a bull, they have market reports that they can look at. And so we told them that the range of the bulls that they're going to seed, all 18, were within the range of 2,000 all the way to 8,500. This was for us to mimic the market information, just like a normal producer would use or seed. And then we also incorporated eye tracking. This is where most folks, probably, if you've heard about this study, most folks are here to see the eye tracking part of it. So I'll explain it for the folks that might not be too familiar with it. And so what we did was we had actual desktops, just like you're seeing here. And underneath the monitor, we actually have a bar. And this is an infrared bar that we would calibrate to each person before they started the experiment. And we would actually calibrate the bar or the eye tracking technology to their eyes. Some folks have glasses, some folks don't. And so we can actually calibrate to each person, and so that we can see exactly where they were looking at on a computer screen. And this is what it would look like. They would see simply the monitor. They would have a keyboard on their side, so you can see against the wall, there's 2 people actually taking the experiment in Iowa. And what they're looking at there on the laptop version that you see there is the experiment that they're actually running. So we could actually watch them in real time and see what they were looking at. And so the eye tracking itself also allows for the heat maps that most people are more interested in anyway, in terms of seeing where do people actually look at. So this goes back to the original person that we had in 2022 using his eyes. What was he looking at on a given bull? And then they would enter the experiment, and this is what they would see. They would, after the bottom, they input the price, and this is the screen that they would see. They would get a true market price. So this person put that the price was 2,500, and the bull was actually sold for 3,750. And so they were told that it was an inaccurate prediction. And so then they would go on to another bull. And so on the 18 bulls that we selected, we actually put each person into a control group, so i.e. the normal layout, just like we're seeing right now, or they were put into one of the 3 treatments. And so the first treatment will be a normal EPD profile, but without the percentile rank. So we remove the percentile ranks. Treatment 2 would be the inverted version of an EPD profile. So all the indexes that you see on the right-hand side currently, they would go to the left-hand side, and they would still have their corresponding percentile ranks underneath. And then the third treatment, or the 4th group, were ones that had the inverted EPD profile, but without the percentile ranking. And so we had the control, we had the control without percentile ranks. We had the second treatment, which would be an inverted EPD profile with percentile ranks. And then we had the next one, or the last one, which would be inverted without percentile ranks. So we had 4 different buckets. And to kind of show you a different way, these are our 4 groups. So we have a normal with percentile rank. We have a flipped, or the inverted without percentile rank. We have EPDs without rank, or with a normal EPD profile. And then we also have the inverted or flipped without percentile rank. And the bulls that we selected, we actually used 3 of the most common bulls that we have in the Southeast, but also were applicable to Iowa. So we had 6 Angus bulls, 6 Simmental bulls, and 6 Hereford bulls. They were based on, or selected on, their economic indexes. So Troy helped us out, and we went to a sale. We would select 3 high quality or 3 high performing bulls, or 2 high performing, 2 average, and then 2 low performing bulls. And so we have 2 high quality, 2 average, 2 low quality for each of these 3 breeds, which gives us the 18 prediction casts, or the bulls that were used in our study. And so for the analysis, I'm going to kind of give you what we were chasing at the end of it. Don't worry about the word multi-probit regression analysis. I did that just in case there was an economist, or Lane, if you wanted to look at the model that we used. This is the model that we selected and used in our study. But essentially what we were trying to analyzed was, and Dr. Decker from Missouri made this comment last year at BIF, plus or minus $500 is pretty hard to do, right? That is, to guess a bull's price range within $500, regardless of where it's at, that's a pretty difficult task. But if we relax that task and take a plus or minus 10% or plus or minus 20%, that bullseye of plus or minus $500 becomes a little easier. And so what we wanted to do is say, okay, if we're trying to elicit their best guess, even though they could be, $501 off, what if they were within 10%, or what if they were within 20%? What do those types of people look like? What drives them to have those types of predictions? And then the other thing we wanted to do was look at equality differentiation. I'll explain this more in depth here in a little bit, but basically, for the folks that can estimate the quality of a bull, whether it be high, low, or high, average, and low, they could essentially also be consistently overestimating the prices or consistently underestimating prices. But they're able to delineate the quality. That's just as important as someone being very accurate. And so we wanted to see if we could actually pick up any common causal effects for that. And then also we have the eye tracking data that tells us what exactly people are looking at. And so for this study, we had 208 people look at 18 bulls each. Majority of the people in our sample, 80% of them have Angus in their herd. Right at 28% of the folks had Simmental in their herd or told us that they use Simmental genetics. 32% or 33% of folks said that they had Hereford in their genetics. So they actually, or in their herd, they actually use genetic or Hereford genetics in their herd. One of the things that I want to pinpoint though is those next four things, uses EPDs, uses genomically enhanced EPDs, uses phenotype, and uses EPD rank. We asked everyone, when you're analyzing or looking at a bull, do you use any of these four things? What you can see there is 80% of folks said that they actually use EPDs. This is the second time that we've gotten right at 80%. Our first study that I referenced from 2021 and 2022 had right about 80%. The next thing that's kind of interesting is, do you use genomically enhanced EPDs? Only 50% of people said that they use genomically enhanced EPDs. Again, this corresponds or is within par of the previous study that we've done. And there's been other studies done by other universities and other researchers that find on average, it's about 1 out of 2 people actually use genomically enhanced EPDs. I guess this means that the genetic people like Troy actually have job security out there. The folks that said that they use phenotype, it was right at 90%. So 90% of folks said that they use phenotype in their decision-making process. I don't know what the other 10% of folks are doing, to be honest, because I don't know how you can select a bull for a herd without visually inspecting them. It could be, we have dairy producers in Tennessee that say, we don't even look at what they look like. We actually just look at their EPD profile and make a decision. So it might be something similar to that. EPD rank. So Troy and I have talked about accuracy of EPDs. How can someone use accuracy? We were like, well, people told us that they use EPD rank in the previous study. Let's test that. Well, we also asked the same question, and around 62.5% of folks says they actually use EPD percentile rank for an EPD when looking at bulls. And so, again, that's kind of interesting that folks that don't use genomically enhanced EPDs and folks that don't use EPD ranking is a pretty large portion of our sample. Other questions that we asked is more of a economic behavior kind of questioning, general confidence, financial confidence, and risk tolerance to delay gratification and general trust. The one thing I want you to focus on there is that from a general confidence standpoint, our folks were right at 80 and a half or 80 and a quarter. So we had pretty generally confident people that were taking our study. When it came to financial confidence, it actually lowered down to 75. Almost 75 and a half folks says they have somewhat or really strong financial confidence. But the one that I want to kind of harp on a little bit are the next two, risk tolerance. So on a scale from 1 or 0 to 10, 0 being not risk tolerant to 10 being an absolute risk tolerant person, on average, our folks in the sample are 6.46, meaning they're above average of risk tolerance. Oftentimes in agriculture, as an economist or a farm management specialist, I make the case that if you're in agriculture, you're probably more risk tolerant or risk loving or risk seeking than you want to admit to it. Essentially, we are producing a product that we have no control over the price. We are price takers, and so we are willing to risk money in order to receive a price that we have no control over. And so generally speaking, we're more risk tolerant than the average person or the average person from a population in the US. And so the tolerance to delayed gratification from 0, meaning I want my result to happen now, versus 10, meaning, hey, I'm willing to wait forever and a day in order for delay for that gratification of a decision. Most folks in our sample were at 7.46 or on average 7.46, meaning 7.46 means that they're more willing to wait for that delayed gratification. I think that's big in the cattle industry because, when we make decisions, replacement heifers, bulls, for instance, we are making decisions that are going to impact our bottom line for the next 3, 5, 10 years. I mean, some folks keep, replacement females in their herds until those cows are 9, 10 years old. So the decision that someone made 9, 10 years ago is impacting what they're realizing right now. No study in the livestock side or experimental side has ever proven that. So this was one of the first studies that even asked that question. Our average age was 43 years. 76% of our sample were male. And one of the interesting things was almost 40% of people indicated that the cattle business is their full-time job. So we actually got people that are making decisions that are impacting their household income in our sample, which was pretty unique and cool. And so I'm going to jump straight into the results. If you look at the control on average, so the control again is a normal EPD profile as we know it today. You have the EPDs as they normally are presented with the percentile rank. Over the 18 bulls for all 208 people, the average accuracy was 21.43%. There were tasks where that whole group actually was not accurate at all at 0%. And the max accuracy of that whole group, if they were selected and put into that group, there was a task where they were at 47.62% accurate. So 1 out of 2 bulls. The treatment 1, so a regular profile without percentile rank, we actually have increased accuracy at 23.63%. The minimum was actually higher at 1.85, and the max was 38.89, so almost 39% accuracy as a max. The hypothesis was that if we inverted the profile and we had those EPD profile or the EPD rankings underneath those EPDs, our hypothesis was that treatment 2 would be a layout that actually increased accuracy for folks. And overall in our study, we actually find that people that were in this group were almost 26% accurate. So essentially they were almost 4.5% accurate compared to the control. The minimum was actually higher at 5.8%, 5.08%, and the maximum was almost 54.5% or 54.25%. So not only is the profile on average, we have more accurate people, the likelihood of them being wrong is actually the lowest out of all 3 or out of the 4 groups, and their accuracy was the highest out of all of the other groups. And so for us, that signals just from a simple average standpoint, the layout is inducing higher and better accuracy. Treatment 3, which was the inverted without percentile rank, the average was 22.22%. The minimum was 1.89, and the max was 39, almost 40%. And so for us to see that every treatment was actually higher on average than the control or what we normally have out here in our breed association EPD profiles was very interesting and somewhat surprising to see that the control was actually the lowest out of all of them. And so we look at this, at first it's going to look like, oh God, or oh gosh, an economist threw up a big table. Bear with me for a second. What you're going to see is we have the variables on the left-hand side, and as you work your way, you see a plus or minus 500, plus or minus 10%, plus or minus 20%. These are each one of those models that I was telling you we were running. So plus or minus $500 of a guess, plus or minus 10% of the accurate price or guess, plus or minus 20% of being accurate. And what we did was each one of these are their own individual models, but there are some consistencies across the board. The first one was whenever we make the task super difficult and we're trying to identify the people that are hitting the bullseye, plus or minus $500. Treatment 2 or our inverted with percentile rank was statistically, those folks were higher at being accurate. So we find statistical significance that having the inverted profile or the inverted layout with percentile rank actually had people being more accurate. And so if you're a producer that looks at EPD layouts, like myself included, the layout matters to us in terms of understanding the information and being accurate with what we're intaking and making a decision on. For us, this is very, very nuanced and very cool, but also from a research standpoint, no one's ever really proven that layouts matter, and we have. The next one was Iowa. I mentioned that we ran this study in Iowa, and we had a sample of around 40 people in Iowa. If you look at these numbers, 0.06, 0.04, 0.09, all that means is that the people in Iowa were statistically more likely to be correct compared to Alabama, Tennessee, and West Virginia. And I say that as a Tennessee employee, the Iowa people were better than everyone else. That's basically what those numbers are telling you. The Simmental folks, if people are using Simmental genetics, whenever we're looking at the plus or minus 10% level, those folks are more likely to be accurate. If folks are using genomically enhanced EPD, so when people are saying, I use those tools, those folks are also more likely to be accurate. So they're using more information to make a decision. Those folks are more likely to be accurate. And then when we use EPD ranks, again, we find that people are more likely to be accurate. And if you remember, the summary stat said that 1 out of 2 are using genomically enhanced, and 6 out of 10 are actually using EPD percentile ranks. Those people that are using those tools are more likely to be correct than the people that are not. So the takeaway from that is, as a consumer or as a person that's in the industry, use all the information you can because you're going to make a better decision. If we look at the risk preference, I mentioned that in the cattle industry, I think people are more risk tolerant or risk seeking than they want to admit. We found that if the more risk tolerant or the more you're willing to take on risk, the more likely you are to be wrong. And so that, I think that if you think about it, the more risk taking or the more risk tolerant you are, that means you're willing to gamble more, right? And if you're willing to gamble more, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. And in our study, we found that those people lose more often than the ones that don't. Delayed gratification, we actually found when we make that difficult task at plus or minus $500, the people that are willing to wait and have delayed gratification on a decision that they're making today are more likely to be correct whenever they were making a decision. And then trust. How much do you trust a breeder? We asked, how important is trust to you? The more that people trust, the more accurate they are. And so, whoa, what's happening, Troy? Look at there, I'll figure it out. And so the takeaway from that is, we have people, the layout matters. The people that are more risk-taking are more likely to be wrong. Our people in Iowa were better than everyone else in our sample. And then that if you're willing to wait and make a decision that has delayed gratification, you're more likely to be correct. So now I'm going to move on to this quality differentiation. And I drew up these 3 bulls from a slide that was a long time ago in this slide deck. And I put the words high quality, average quality, low quality. These are in no particular order. I'm not saying that the black bull on the left is high quality, the Hereford is the average quality, and that Angus or the Angus bull on the right-hand side is low quality. I'm just throwing them up there to kind of just give you, if we have 3 bulls that are that vary in terms of high quality, average quality, low quality, the goal is to have it to where the high quality bull, you are willing to pay more for a high quality bull because he's worth more. You're willing to pay a little bit less for an average quality bull compared to the high quality, and you're willing to pay a lot less for the low quality bull. In the economics world, that's called price discrimination. The higher quality, the more you're willing to pay. The low quality, the less you're willing to pay. So the goal is to get there. Some folks in Tennessee, our producers are sometimes notorious for this. Maybe that's not their goal. This is not their goal. This part is their goal. I don't want to buy a high quality bull because I'm never going to look at them because I can't afford them. And I'm going to go to the average bull and I'm going to pay if it's a good price and he's going cheap, I'll get him. But by God, I'm going to take that low quality bull because I know I can afford him and I'm going to overpay for that low quality bull. That's not what our goal should be. Our goal should be, hey, we're going to pay and allocate the most amount of money to high quality. We're going to reduce that money if it's an average quality, and we're going to reduce it even more if it's low quality. But the people in our study could also, from a study standpoint, there are people that took this study that were consistently overestimating or consistently underestimating the price. So from a plus or minus 500, plus or minus 10, plus or minus 20, they were deemed inaccurate, right? Because if they're not in the ballpark, then they're considered wrong. Well, in the real world, just because you're overestimating doesn't mean you don't know how to quality differentiate bulls. And so what we wanted to do is say, okay, with the same data, can we identify those types of folks? And so what we did was, we did it, and I actually got to what we call marginal effects. And what you're looking at here are the same variables. We did not find that layout mattered, so the significance of the layout went away. We did find that the Iowa people were more likely to be correct at a clip of 23.8%. So that number is a percentage that we move the decimal over. So the people in Iowa were 23.8% more likely to be accurate. So our folks that from Iowa State, y'all's folks were at a more accurate at a very high clip compared to the rest of the sample. Genomically enhanced EPD folks, so the folks that use genomically enhanced EPDs and knew how to use them, they were 17.4% more likely to be accurate. The folks that use ranked EPDs were 20.7% more likely to be accurate. So if you think about just those two variables alone, genomically enhanced EPDs and ranked EPDs or EPD ranks, you're talking about almost a 37.5% or almost 35% more likelihood to be accurate because you're using information. Confidence, the more confident you are, the more likely you are to be correct at, just shy of 1%. And then financial confidence, the more confident you were in your financial decisions, the less likely you were to be correct at, or be able to delineate the quality of bulls at just shy of 0.3%. And so now I'm going to show you the eye tracking stuff, probably stuff that people really care about, to be honest. And so what you're looking at here is a sample. This is an example of what people would see. They have the bull on a loop video, this is a still shot, and the EPD profile. With the eye tracking technology, you're looking at a bull that we take all of the people that took the study that saw this bull, and we aggregate to a heat map. So overall, this profile here is a normal EPD profile without percentile rank. So in our world, this would be treatment 1 or the second group. We actually can see that they look at this bull all over from a phenotypic standpoint. So the little blue box that you're looking at over the bull, overall, everyone was looking at the bull's video. If you look at what we're calling EPD production, so calving ease, birth weight, weaning weight, you see that we have a lot of attention being paid towards those EPDs. And then if you will look at the middle EPDs and also the indexes, we have far less attention being paid towards those EPDs. And so what you're looking at on these boxes, the technology that we have, we can actually isolate what we call AOIs, areas of interest. And we can do this for all these bulls over all the people that we sampled, and we can actually get to these heat maps. Another way we can do that is if we break down those boxes, we have phenotype, so the bull's phenotype for that video, the production EPDs, production EPD percentiles, what I'm calling the middle EPDs, the middle EPD percentiles if they had them available, the indexes or the selection indexes, and also the selection index profile or percentiles. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different areas of interest that we can look at. And by doing that, we actually can use iMotions as the suite of or the technology that we use. We can actually look at the percentage of respondents that actually gazed at these AOIs, meaning they actually put attention of their eyes onto these boxes. We can look at the percentage of respondents and how long, if they fixated and how many times they fixated, so how many times they sit there and read that information. We can do an average of how often respondents looked at and fixated on AOIs at least once, and then the average amount of fixations detected. So again, this is what a sample would look like. Here are 2 examples. One is on the left-hand side is the Simmental bull. The one on the right-hand side is an Angus bull in our study. And you can see these were inaccurate guesses or accurate guesses. These are examples of accurate guesses, but if you look, they never even looked at the economic indexes or the selection indexes. All they did was look at the bull's phenotype. They looked at the production EPDs and some of the middle EPDs, and they moved on. So the question becomes, what did those people look like, and what makes them be able to be accurate? That's where those previous models that you saw, all that math and those big charts, that's what's telling us. But for us here in this situation, it's allowing us to visually see where they're looking. And so for results for all the bulls, what you're looking at here are the index, so the box over the indexes. The index percentiles are the box over the percentiles, the middle EPDs, the middle percentiles, the production EPDs, the production percentiles, and phenotype. The one thing I want you to focus on are the highlighted numbers. If you look for AOI, so area of interest, gaze, and fixation, the index percentiles when they were presented were the lowest of all of those 7 boxes, meaning 11% and 10% actually looked at those index percentiles. If you look at the green numbers, middle EPDs and production EPDs were the highest at 64.32% and 66.47% on the middle EPDs and production EPDs. And actually almost 60% of those folks fixated, meaning they looked at it and sat there and read for a while. They were fixated on those numbers. If you look at phenotype, they had 97% gazed at them, but 100% of folks fixated on it. And so we see from this for all the bulls, all 18 bulls, everyone looked at phenotype at almost 97 or 98, 100% clip. The production EPDs and the middle EPDs were looked at the most often, but our indexes and our index percentiles were looked at the least. And we said at the beginning of this presentation that our geneticists have made it to where these indexes can help make it a more efficient decision, or it makes the decision easier for a producer. But these folks are not even looking at those indexes, those selection indexes, regardless of breed. If we look at the highest quality bulls, so the 6 highest valued bulls out of our 18, index percentiles were at 13.15% and the index profiles were at 13%. So the percentiles were not being utilized by those folks. But if you look at the index, 42.42 and 40% actually looked at the index. So if we look at that, we also then can look at the production EPDs. Again, almost 60% of those folks are looking at production EPDs. And the phenotype was almost 100% again. For us, that's another indication that on average, they're looking at phenotype, they're looking at the middle of production EPDs, but not the percentile ranks. And that holds true whenever we say, okay, let's just look at our 6 highest value bulls. For our 6 lowest value bulls in our study, it's kind of a similar story. Index percentiles were right at 11% of gaze and fixation. Middle EPDs were 68 and 62%. Production EPDs were 72 and 65%. And phenotype were at 97 and 93%. But interesting enough, this was the lowest number of all phenotypes. The low quality bulls were looked at phenotypically the lowest or the least. And so all that to say, because of this research and because we know where they're looking now, I think the question becomes, how do you lay out catalogs that allow for someone to intake information and make good decisions for themselves? A repeat customer is the best type of customer, and the more that they can feel that their decision was the best one and the accurate one, the more likely they are to be a repeat customer for you. So I think layouts become the next question in terms of one of these 3 is one better than the other. I don't know. That's what we're starting to think about in terms of the next phases of these studies. So conclusion, our study suggests that emphasizing economic selection indexes and catalogs can increase the accuracy, but as we saw, they're not looking at them as much. So maybe we need to put those more to the front in order for those indexes to even have a shot when people are making their decision. Producers who reported using ranked EPDs and genomically enhanced EPDs were better off. So the more information you use, the better off you are. And then familiarity with and a reliance on more sophisticated genetic tools can enhance a producer's ability to make informed price evaluations or price decisions. So if you can use all the information, the better you are in the long run. And then participants that had higher trust scores and greater willingness to delay a reward, they were more accurate. And then those with higher risk tolerance or more risk seeking were actually more likely to be wrong. And the producers from Iowa consistently outperformed the other 3 states. The eye tracking study, producers use a combination of tools in the selection process, but phenotype is the #1 thing that they used at an average of 97%. Breed indexes are not commonly used whenever they're making this decision. So out of the 208 people, we saw that those indexes not only are used the least, but even when we talk about percentiles, they were used at almost 11%, 10.5% of the time. Percentiles are referenced less than EPD, so the actual EPD number is looked at more than the actual percentile rank. And so I think that offers some question in terms of from an academic or an extension standpoint, do we need to do more education on what those numbers mean so that people can use them? Production EPDs are often the most used, so calving ease, birth weight, weaning weight, those production EPDs are the ones that are used most often. And then compared to the overall average, the specific breed groups indexes are utilized the least. One last shameless plug for us in the ag economist world. Southern Ag Today is a daily blog that comes to your email box. We cover everything from livestock to crop markets to, international trade right now is a hot topic that we write a lot about. And so if you want to get on our list, there's the QR code and I'll leave that here in a minute. But if you ever need to get a hold of me, this is my information. I am still a traditionalist. We call it Twitter, and that's my Twitter handle. Email is the easiest way to get a hold of me as well. But with that, I'll take any questions if there are any, and then we'll go from there. Mr. Tucker, you got a mic, Troy?
No, I'll be all right.
If you can, I know you can yell.
But Charlie, if you go back to your AOI data and you add $10,000 to the base price of the bull, don't you think participants' rankings and AOI especially would be different? Because if somebody's gonna reach in their pocket that far, they're probably gonna be a little more informed in terms of use of the tools that are available and how they study them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so one of the questions we asked, I didn't put it in here, but we asked, what's the most you've ever paid for a bull? Whenever we put that into our model, it was not significant at all. And so part of that, to me, there could be an underlining part where they might have paid the bull, but they might have had a bull buyer going out looking for bulls for them. So they might have paid for it, but didn't pay. They didn't physically go look and buy that bull themselves. The other thing is, since our cap was $8,500, which in the commercial world, that's pretty expensive for the average commercial producer. I think a question like that, like what if we get to 12,000, 15,000 or higher, or even 10,000? I think that you're going to find some differences, and we saw that in a previous study that we did, because we had a bull that was around $25,000 in the previous study, and the people that were accurate at guessing that, they were using GE EPDs, EPD ranks. They were using all the technology. So in the previous study, we found that. For this one, we lowered the max price of the bulls of the samples that we used. So my short answer is yes. In this study, we wouldn't pick up on that, but I think that's a very, a causal assumption there based on the previous study that we also did.
All right. One more quick question for Charlie. John, yeah.
Yeah, with 60% of the respondents working all farm, and when we consider most of the yearling bulls, most people find those to use on a heifer.
Mm-hmm.
So isn't it just kind of on your thought process that they're probably just gonna look at calving, right birth weight, maybe weaning weight is the only traits, and then, the picture of the bull?
I think that's a good probably theory behind it, but I also think if you look at our sample and the average producer also markets their animals at weaning, right? They as soon as they wean, they might take them straight off the cow, or they might do some backgrounding and then they sell them. And so I think our selection sample out of the Southeast is one of the reasons why we see that. But even with our Iowa folks, and we hold everything constant in our model, we found that statistical difference based on Iowa folks, but not because of the other variables. But I think it's more because of how they market their animals at the end of the day.
On that cumulative heat map, they don't even look at cavities, right? It's right, birth weight and weaning weight, the two that they're most comfortable.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that Troy and I, we've talked about before. It's like in Tennessee, some of our producers, they harp and will hang their hat on birth weight. And it's like, well, birth weight is, it's probably not better, or I'm gonna make a statement, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. Calving ease is a better indicator than birth weight, by far, hands down, no questions asked. So why don't we use calving ease direct versus birth weight? And Troy and we've had producers argue with us in extension meetings, and I just turned to him and say, that's your job. I do numbers. So, I think it's something that I don't know why they hang their hat out or they get stuck there, but that's what they do. That's just what their habits.